Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March Business of Alt Protein seminar. I know folks are trickling in right now, so we'll give everyone just a minute or two. Really hard to believe that it's already March of 2024, but really appreciate you all joining us this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you're calling in from. And on that front, I know that folks are dialing in from a bunch of different places. So would love to learn where you're calling in from if you'd like to share that in the chat. And also, please let us know if there's a specific area of commercialization that you would like to learn more about today. It would be great to get a sense of who's on the call. I know I'm calling in from Sausalito, California, so the Bay Area. Our panelists are dialing in from all over as well. We have some folks in Europe. See, we have someone from Turkey, Denver, Halifax, even Thailand. Thank you. Raleigh, North Carolina, Brazil, Berlin. Love to see that. We have quite the group today. And it's just a reminder, if there's a specific area of commercialization that you're eager to learn more about, feel free to share that as well. That'll help us guide the conversation a little bit more today. And just to maybe get us going, my name's Audrey Spence. I am the Startup Innovation Lead here at the Good Food Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the seminar today. And I know we have a big topic, commercialization, and there are just so many elements to successfully commercializing a product, particularly in the alt protein space, where there are many technical and also business challenges to overcome. And for today's conversation, we'll be focusing a bit more on the going to market strategy side of commercialization versus developing or validating an idea or a technology. And I think we'll have a great conversation. Our panelists have a huge amount of experience in bringing products to market. And they're also GFI mentors, and we're eager to share more about the mentor program with you, because they and over 25 other mentors are available to connect with all of you to help address some of the challenges you face as you're building your company. And before I hand it over to our panel discussion, I have a few housekeeping items. First of all, for those of you that might be new to the work of the Good Food Institute, we are an international nonprofit, and we are developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. And so we identify effective solutions, we mobilize resources and talent, and we empower partners across the food system to make alt proteins accessible, affordable, and my favorite, delicious. And we'll also be recording the seminar. We'll post it to our YouTube channel. We will mail you all a copy of the recording, so you will be able to revisit any of this content, or if you need to drop off, don't worry about it. You can watch the recording later on. And we'd also love if you could ask your questions in the Q&A box versus the chat. This just helps us keep track of them more easily. We have time for our panel in the beginning, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A in the end. You can ask your questions throughout the seminar, but we'll probably get to them towards the end. And again, please ask those in the Q&A box. And with that, it is my pleasure to hand things over to my colleague, Lane Clark. Welcome, Lane. Lane is GFI's Senior Corporate Engagement Manager of Innovation. And among the many other things she does at GFI, Lane launched our mentor program and has helped facilitate over 550 connections between mentors and mentees since the program started in mid-2022. And Lane, before we get started with the panel, would you like to share a little bit more about the mentor program with folks on the call?
Sure. Thanks, Audrey. First and foremost, I want to say how grateful we at GFI are for the generosity of the amazing mentors who volunteer their time to support alt protein entrepreneurs, founders, and startup teams. Startups at all stages can reach out to mentors via our website at any time. The ad hoc program is available to mentees looking for advice related to particular business challenges. Each of the 30-plus GFI mentors has specific areas of expertise, resulting in a powerhouse group of experts available to help with fundraising, pitching, developing a go-to-market strategy, addressing IP strategy, answering R&D questions, overcoming scaling challenges, networking, and so much more. While the program is designed for individuals or teens actively involved in an early to late stage startup, it is also open to more mature companies as well as investors. Please join me in welcoming the mentors on today's panel. Let's get into the discussion. So this, I think everyone can come back on camera now. Thank you. Okay, so thanks to all of you for being here. I thought maybe we could start off by just a round of introductions and maybe a word about why you decided to give your time to GFI. Margie, do you want to start?
Yeah, thanks, Lane. I'm so excited to be here today and be also amongst such amazing mentors. So I'm Marjorie Monica. I have been at Impossible Foods over the last 9.5 years and have been an integral member of the team building, designing, scaling the Impossible Burger. And currently I lead our technology development teams. This includes material science, flavor technology, and extrusion. And you might be curious, well, why am I here today talking about commercialization? And I think a lot of the success of Impossible is how we're able to blend our technology development with the commercialization mindset, developing with the end in mind. And so I hope today we'll have some good information to share and some tidbits that can carry you forward in your journey in creating an alt protein business. And one of the reasons why I became a mentor is really trying to understand how we can get this entire sector to flourish. Uh, it's difficult to create a new business, a new product, to innovate and develop the food sector. And I'm hoping that even a small tidbit of advice could be helpful for one of you to build a great product.
Thank you, Margie. I'm just going the direction of my screen. Aaron, that would be you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eran Noah. I'm the IP director for Remilk, which is an Israeli startup company that produces milk proteins by precision fermentation. I've started my role 2 years ago, and I looked for counterparts in different startups in the industry, and I didn't find any. So I'm on a quest to help GFI raise awareness to IP within the ecosystem.
Thank you, Aaron. Alex, you're up next.
Thanks, Lane. It's great to be here. I'm super happy to participate in this panel. I'm Alex Bastos. I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland. I'm heading what we call front-end innovation for Givaudan Taste and Wellbeing. That's the food division part of the food division, the part of the food part of Givaudan. And that front-end innovation is mostly about startup innovation and ventures. So that's what I'm heading for the company. Givaudan is a very known player in the food industry. We are around for 250 years, so a young startup, if I can say that way. We are very proud of what we do, which is mostly about the food experience for consumers, how food tastes, how food looks, how food bites, and so on. And the question was also why I decided to join GFI as a mentor. I just love the community. I love the force for good. I love the energy. And these are big reasons for us to give away as well back to the community, which has given so much to us. So super happy to be part of it.
Thanks, Alex. And Emil?
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Emil Virag, and I am a supply chain and operational professional. Gained my experience in corporate environment, and I am determined to share best practices, let's say, showcase do's and don'ts for startups. I'm also startup myself. I'm independent consultant and helping alternative protein startup scale-up companies to succeed in the industry. Our main objective is to create a sustainable food ecosystem, and this is why I am really glad to work with the GFI in the mentor community and work together with startups in order you to succeed.
Thank you, Emil. And last but certainly not least, Howard.
Thank you, Lane. Honored to be here on this panel today. I'm a serial entrepreneur, although I don't like that term very much. The last two companies that I founded We're in the industrial automation equipment space. We made equipment for manufacturing and distribution centers. It was acquired, and I've now been spending my time mentoring to GFI and elsewhere. I have experience in several industries. I've designed dozens of manufacturing facilities with my companies. I've designed and built hundreds and thousands of pieces of equipment, manufacturing equipment. I am a latecomer to the food industry compared to everybody here. About 2 or so years ago, I was working with a company that through Georgetown University that was a food startup company, an AI food startup company. And I started learning about the problems associated with our food system production and distribution. And it caught my, I haven't been the same since. So it now has all my attention. So I love working with the startups at GFI. I've talked to a lot of them. They range from the nascent to the very experienced. We talk about things, everything from needing to quit your day job and jump into entrepreneurship full time to scaling and growing your businesses. So everything is within that scope. Besides my efforts at GFI, I do mentor at various universities. I'm also an impact investor, an advisor, and a consultant, and a board member of the Halcyon House, which is a social impact incubator here in Washington, D.C. And happy to be here and talk to all you.
Thank you, Howard. I have had the pleasure of working with Howard for many years now through Georgetown University. And I can say firsthand, incredible mentor and entrepreneur. Okay, so I want to get started. First, I want to encourage any of you to jump in. I'll frequently direct some of these questions to a specific person, but that doesn't mean that we don't welcome all your opinions. So let's have a pretty casual, informal discussion. And Alex, I will start with you. And the question is, where does the consumer fit into the commercialization process? And what do companies need to know about their consumers?
Well, you know, this is a topic that we like so much. In our preparation, we were talking about that quite a lot. You know, I was looking at some figures, like MIT said in the past that 95% of new product innovation fails when it goes to market. And in food, we work with something like between 75 to 98%. So it's a very difficult, you know, thing to achieve, which is market acceptability. And we know it fails mostly because like consumers are not involved at the right time and under the right conditions. Even recently now, our European team will release some, you know, recent consumer research we did here in Europe. And it came out that 32% of consumers are very resistant to try again, you know, plant-based products. Yet, I mean, there's still a large number that we can work with and change that story. So this all goes back to consumers, right? And to me, and we talk about this term, I think it was not, you know, firstly mentioned here at Givaudan, but we talk about consumer co-creation, which means when should the consumer be involved? Everywhere. Starting from the before you go and do any product development, see where the trends are going, where the consumers are going, how restaurants are changing, you know, a mix of ingredients, how they are hearing the consumers. When you start, you know, engage the consumer and try to understand where the gaps are. As you develop, engage them on trials, get their feedback, adjust your product. And as you launch, before you go and launch, also test that again before you go and put that into the marketplace. And then finally, even after you launch, you need to be ready to take the feedback and improve. So for us, it's very important, and I give that advice to every single startup, engage the consumer everywhere. I shared with you guys, you know, during the preparation that I heard so much and so many young startups saying, no, I'm going to do like an app. I'm going to do the 1.1, the 1.2, the 1.3, the 1.4, thinking that a food consumer is like an app consumer, which is not the case. Food is very personal. People are looking for experiences. And if they have a bad experience, it's not like they wait for the next, you know, update and upgrade of an app. So you really have to engage consumers everywhere. That would be my my point here, Lane, and I couldn't stress more, especially because, again, you see with the numbers how much new product development fail when they go to market.
Excellent insights, Alex. And I'll add that the consumers can change depending on geography. You have to be very careful as you commercialize and expand to make sure that you understand the consumers and the geographies where you're expanding. Would anybody else like to add anything to Alex's wisdom?
Just I would like to emphasize what Alex mentioned here, that it's good to validate in early stage the value proposition to the consumer. Talk with the consumer, give samples, and ask if they would like to pay for your product. Because definitely the price point is also something what you need to consider when you are launching a new product. And the food is very personal. So from one market, if we are talking about Asia, perhaps it's different taste versus North America. So one size doesn't fit all. And you need to understand what are the cultural background of the consumer. And don't be shy to talk also with the retailers, because they have huge variety of products. They are bombarded with huge variety of innovations. And ask also the potential retail partner how they see the traction, how they see your value proposition in a certain geography, in a certain market. And of course, assess the landscape of the competition, because you need to offer something unique. You are addressing a niche, and you need to create your competitive advantage, either through superior quality or cost leadership. You need to offer something unique. Why the consumer to choose your product versus the competition?
Yeah, Emil, I'm wondering if you find, I know Audrey and I have had this conversation on several occasions. I think that when a founder or a startup team is offering samples, when a company is really small and they're actually just bootstrapping it and on the ground offering samples themselves, it's so hard for them to get honest feedback, because people are just conditioned to say that they like something, even if they don't, because they're talking to somebody who's proud of it. So how do you recommend companies get around that? Any of you can answer that, but it's a problem.
Of course, it's you can have a really valuable feedback from your close friends, and you can ask even to say, okay, please tell me your honest feedback. And of course, you should not just rely on your best friends. You can go and also to ask, for example, at campus, university campus, where students are always open to something new, to taste, or free lunch, by the way. And this can be a valuable, almost free of charge, a good consumer insight for your innovation.
I would add to it. Sorry, go ahead, Howard.
If I can add, sometimes it's not a question of asking, is this good or bad, but it's a question of asking attributes that ask them to describe the product so that you can get out of that whether it's good or bad. You don't want to, you certainly don't want to go to friends and family, because they're all going to tell you, they're all going to lie to you and tell you that it's great, you should go do this, and waste your time. But in the case of test markets and research groups, you need to ask questions that are going to lead you to the answer, not necessarily just ask for the answer.
If I can share from my experience within Remilk, we are obviously formulating alternative milk products from our precision fermentation protein, and we started obviously with the small taste panels within the company. And the first few prototypes were bad enough that we didn't need a second opinion. But obviously, as time progressed and the prototypes became better and better, it got to the point that we were not sure if they are really good or we are just kidding ourselves. At that point, we just took it outside for professional taste panels, like double-blind tasting. They don't know us, we don't know them. They can be merciless and ruthless in their critique. And we were pleasantly surprised because we found that we are the ones that are too critical, and the general public scores our products higher than we are, and that's great news.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd like to build off Aran's experience that tasting within your own employee population is great for incremental feedback, understanding where things are. But since your population of tasters in your company are going to get super used to the defects and also the good attributes that you've developed, and so
Right.
important to get that alternative perspective, not at a trade show where people are only going to try to impress you by giving them positive feedback. I think, you can't underestimate that blind consumer testing. I'd like to add too that it's not just that end product eating experience that you're optimizing for. You're optimizing for the end-to-end consumer experience. That means, how does it look in pack? How does it hold through refrigeration or freezing? When you open it, what does it look like? How does it cook, smell? How does it handle? There are so many elements that you're designing for the end-to-end consumer experience that if you miss one, if you miss that aroma, if you miss that specific texture, if it looks funky while it cooks, let's say there's slime release versus oil release, all these things are noticed by the consumer, and it can turn them off even before they even put it in their mouth. And so I think it's so important to not over-index on the end on-plate experience. That, of course, has to be amazing, but really focus on making sure that there's nothing before that that's going to deter the consumer from buying your product again.
Great points, Margie. I want to flip the conversation a little bit. I'm going to open this up to everyone because I think all of you probably have something to add to it. Many companies look to develop partnerships as they scale and grow. What strategic considerations do they need to keep in mind with these partnership opportunities? Please don't feel compelled to answer, but I just wanted to open it up because I do think it's an important point.
If I may to start here, definitely a strategic partner can make you to succeed, and you need to be really selective with whom you are partnering. And my experience in selecting strategic partnership is to have complementary capability to your core capability. So when you are looking at the value chain, you can have complementarity on, for example, you have a distributor partner, you have a retail partner, you have a technology provider, yes, a machine builder, or a raw material ingredient supplier. Because very, very important is to create, let's say, bond. And the bond, what you are creating is based on trust. You can sign 100 pages of NDA. If there is no trust, definitely there are question marks how fair is a strategic partnership. And I have also experiences that if you are not selecting the right partner, the divorce from the partnership is really difficult because you, for example, with a contract manufacturer, you entered in, let's say, a manufacturing agreement. If you had also IP, how well you protected the IP in the discussions, you are transferring technology know-how to them, and you might be in position that in 3-5 years, they will be your competitors. So definitely is about trust, is about reliability, and to make things really clear at the very beginning when you are entering a strategic partnership, make a clear contract. Who is doing what, and in case of exiting a partnership, what's happening in this exit.
Yeah, two very strong points by Emil. One is the finding a partner that will complement you, and the second thing is finding a partner that if and when you get divorced, you don't grow your own competitor. That's two very strong points.
It's been interesting in industries like alternative protein that are newer. It seems like people try and do more internally, and it's really important that you build those partnerships and build that trust. When you talk about complementary skills, it's not only the technical skills, but it's also the compatibility
Yeah.
of what's the cadence that the company works at? What's the end goal of the company? Do they share your common interest? Do you have common goals that are intertwined and not driving you further apart? Those are very important in there. I agree with the divorce analogy. So true. But they should be an additive to you. And I've heard entrepreneurs say that we want to get to a size that we're too big to need partners. We can do everything internally. And to them, I mentioned Apple computers. The iPhone is made by a contract manufacturer. They're a $2 trillion business. If they can do it, you can do it.
Yes, yes.
Maybe I could add, I think the complementarity in terms of skill and capacity or, capabilities, I think skills are definitely there as well. And I would also connect that to your roadmap to a point that you raised at the beginning, Lane, in terms of, expanding to other markets and all this. So we have had experiences with the startups that they started with like local partners, for instance, because it would be more agile in that in their point of view, when they are going to market. But as soon as they have global ambitions in their roadmap, then they have to come to like players that can sustain, that expansion. So it's like people that play in different markets, that have knowledge of different markets, different consumers as well, that can migrate a product from one place to the other. We know regulatory plays a role and supply value chain as well. So I think that's another element. So capability, skills, and your roadmap. So that's what you should look at. And then, of course, like synergies in terms of, goals and the maturity of the company, make sure that you have good contracts there as well, so that the divorce is not too difficult if that happens.
Yeah, I'd like to add, there's been a lot of underlying themes discussed today around, what our capabilities are, what the skills or core competencies of the team that you're building, and understanding when you're young, there are so many directions you can move. You can develop a world-class manufacturing team. You can also develop a world-class technology team. Those don't have to be mutually exclusive. However, thinking about how you're going to deliver, your solution to the marketplace is really key, and holding those non-negotiables really close on your contract to say, this is what we want to be experts in, this is what we want to own, is so critical. I think the other piece that I really like to think about is finding a partner that will grow with you. When you're first starting out, you're not going to have the volumes that are going to make the most economic sense, because you need to get to a certain level of scale. And so finding that partner who has that vision that you have and that's shared is so critical, because there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in the beginning as you build out distribution networks, as you build out supply networks, as you find new customers for your products. And if you don't have that starting point and that starting trust, as Emil talked about, it's going to be very, very hard in an incredibly rocky relationship if you can't find someone who sees the potential and is willing to go grow with you.
Thank you all. Howard, in an earlier call we had about this topic, you said people worry about things that they're most comfortable with, not what is most important to their business. Can you elaborate on this point and why it's so important for founders to be aware of this?
Certainly. And I think Alex hit on it earlier when he talked about getting consumer insights. Oftentimes with new founders, we find that they spend the time doing what they like. Think of a chef making new recipes, but not wanting to think about who they're going to get their distribution from, or what their point of sale terminal is going to be. And all those things matter. So when you're commercializing, you're doing product development, you're doing production, you're doing manufacturing, you're doing sales, you're doing distribution, you're doing customer service. All those things have to be to some level of adequacy for the company to succeed. And so oftentimes we've seen companies spend all the resources doing what we call the fun stuff, the recipe development. And then it gets down to the part that they don't like, and they don't have any money, and they don't have any time. And so they either rush it or fail, and they never get to the goal line. So they fail right before they get to the goal line. What we ask companies to do is to figure out what's the most difficult, what's the riskiest part of the process, and then do a proof of concept that you can get over that hurdle. And then you can get back to the fun stuff. But you need to prove to yourself, and you need to prove to investors that you can accomplish those hard parts of it so that you can spend the money wisely within the company.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. And especially right now in the macroeconomic environment that we find ourselves in, I think that's a very important point. Companies have to de-risk the investment as much as possible. And regardless of how much something is going well in one part of the company, investors are going to dig deeper and look to see what the full story is. So thank you for that. Aaron, how do patents and IP strategy fit into commercialization?
Right. So usually the temptation is like, save money, don't file for many patents because you don't know if the technology of today will be useful tomorrow. But everyone's dream is to go reach the market, put their products on the shelf, and you should know and you should be aware and you should plan that your products will most likely be amenable to reverse engineering, right? So there's one thing to reach the market, but the second thing is to stay in the market. And in order to protect your products from reverse engineering, and there's always a larger fish that can engineer your product, is to file for patents that will define your product as technological essences, right? As compositions of matter, as formulations. The better job you do at that, you gain two things. You make it harder to your competitors to duplicate or replicate your product, and you prevent them from following your recipes and formulation in a way that if it works well, they can make replicas of your product, but in either a lesser quality or in higher prices. So you will win the commercial race. But the idea is to prepare to the off chance that your company will be successful. You should plan to the point that your products will be on the shelf, mass produced, and you should be prepared to the point that your competitors will try to reverse engineer your product, because at that stage, the only thing that will prevent them from selling identical products is your IP, specifically patents.
And looking at it from a different angle, collaboration is so important in a nascent industry, which we are. And a lot of companies find themselves siloing because they're so afraid of their IP getting hijacked. And I wonder, how do we find that sort of happy medium for companies to be able to protect their intellectual property while also being in a collaboration mindset?
Right. So there is a thin line between know-how that should be protected as trade secret, right? Some of the trade secrets can be shared with strategic partners. Like Alexander said, you should be prepared for the divorce. Some of the know-how should not be shared with even the most intimate of partners. But in the long run, the strongest protection you can have, if you can, is for patents, because in patents, there's a give and take relationship. You give to the community complete knowledge about your processes and products, but in return, you get 20 years of exclusivity to produce and sell this product. So if you want to be sure or be as sure as can be that no one will copy your inventions, patents are the way to go, specifically for products that will be mass produced and sold in the market. If you have any kind of process that does not leave the perimeters of your factory and does not leave a substantial trace in the product that does leave your factory, then you can think about keeping it as a trade secret, because this cannot be reverse engineered from the final product that will be eventually be sold. So you should always be mindful of what you share and with who do you share it and in what stage, because as Alex said, trust is a very large issue. Even the best of partners, you trust them now, but you are not a prophet. You cannot see what will be happening in 3 years, 5 years. So if you want to guarantee as much as something can be guaranteed, if you want to guarantee your exclusivity, patents are the way to go.
Okay. Speaking about taking products to market, Margie, many all-protein companies launch their products in food service channels and then seek out broader distribution via retail. Can you talk more about retail expansion and what startups need to consider as they pursue that strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Lane. Yeah, this was a conversation we had the other day, and I think Impossible, we've been building a brand, and we've launched initially in food service with some big name chefs. And I see a lot of companies moving in the same direction. It's really nice to put your product in the hands of people who can create something magical, create that experience on the plate that for a consumer who's just being introduced to your product. And the challenge that you have as you move into retail is you're going from chefs who will take that extra time and perfect that dish to consumers who are making products for their families who may not have the culinary training and expertise in order to work with your product. And therefore, not only your product needs to behave in a way that's robust for that consumer, you also have to build a robust business in the retail sector. Grocery stores are completely maxed out with products, and to get your product in is challenging. You can't just show up to a Safeway and say, hey, I have a great product, will you sell it? You have to provide that case for them. Why do they need it on the shelves? What does that look like? And not only that, you have to create the distribution network. And once you're in the store and you get the shelf space, making sure you show up on the shelf day in and day out so that consumer can find you is critical. And then after you're on the shelves and you're there in and day out, you have to make sure you're being bought. Because if you're not being bought, the retailer, they're going to want to put in products that are going to sell. They want to bring in money. And so you have to make sure that whole cycle is part of that. And it comes down to, does the consumer find value in your product? Are they going to buy it? And have you designed it for the right criteria in order for them to come back and repurchase? Once you have that, you can build that network. You can build that support structure for distribution, for retail, and in the sales team in order to make sure that you're on shelves. I think that it underestimates the amount of effort it takes to manage a retail sector. And it doesn't mean that the food service sector is less effort, it's different. And I think that translation from food service to retail is something that is often underestimated by companies, thinking like, oh, this year I'm going to be in food service. I'll go to this many doors, and then I'll pivot to retail and I'll go to this many doors, and it's going to be great. We'll have this number, this volume. And then normally they don't hit their expectations. And I think it's really important to understand both the speed and expectations of what you're building, and being able to support the entire life cycle of the product.
Margie, can you follow on with just a brief discussion about how to strategize pricing to make sure that you're making up for the cut that everybody gets along the way, and also making up for things like stocking fees and all of the unexpected hidden costs that startups don't anticipate?
Yeah, there are so many. It's not something that I have a lot of experience and expertise in. I'm not part of that business at Impossible. I'm much more upstream, but I hear stories. I'm not going to spread rumors, but I think that the one thing that we do pretty frequently in Impossible is, we have the breakdown of our COGS throughout our whole supply chain. And because we've had some experience, we're able to better estimate what those pricings will be. And we bring all the way back down to our development teams and say, this is the COGS you got to hit in order to make sure that the cost of the retailer is going to make sense. And so it turns out that our R&D teams have tiny budgets to develop on, because we know that there's going to be stacked on additional costs as we move into paying our co-mans or our co-manufacturing fees. We have to pay our distribution networks and supply chain. How do you get product from A to B? Paying in for a trade for retailers, and all of that stacks up. And you don't necessarily always have control at what that cost is on the shelf. The retailer often has that say. And so it's really important that you kind of walk back and understand, what can you really sell it for the retailer where you're still going to have a positive gross margin. I think the other challenge with pricing is that just because you sold it to the customer doesn't mean that there may not be penalties or additional costs on the other side if your product is coding out, if it's not being sold, if there's punctures, if there's defects, if there's in the packaging, if there's things, shelf life, your product doesn't look good on shelf. There's all these different mechanisms that retailers use in order to put that liability back on you to make sure you're delivering really great products. And so it doesn't always end also at, oh, I sold an X number of pounds of product into a retailer. You really have to continue to follow that story and seeing how it's being picked up at the supermarket, and making sure that it's still beautiful on the shelf the whole way through.
Thank you. You mentioned co-mans, and I'd like to turn to Emil for a question about when companies have to reach that point where they're considering whether they build their own production facility or they work with a co-man. This is often even more complicated in fields with new technology, where co-mans may be ill-suited to the approach, like in cultivated or precision fermentation. Can you weigh in on how companies might want to think about this decision?
Definitely, this is very tied to the particularity of the company, the technology, what they are using. And with my discussions with many startups, how to go to the market, invest in, let's say, capability, in-house capability, manufacturing capability, or to externalize. There are pros and cons, depends on which maturity level is the company. But what I can suggest for companies who owns really strict IP and technology, which it's something unique, I would really advise to keep, let's say, the core capability, at least on the pilot scale, in-house, and then understand very well how this technology can be protected further if they go outside to contract manufacturers, and who are the reliable and trustful potential partners. There are many pros and cons in both angles, contract manufacturing or in-house. Definitely one pro for contract manufacturing is to time to market, assuming that the core technology or the majority of the technology is available at the contract manufacturer. A good contract manufacturer can help you to finalize the product development or improve even your product, adding some new capabilities or better
Think we lost Emil just for a second while we're waiting for him.
So important that
we
are playing openly on the cost. It's always a push-pull with the contract manufacturers, because some contract manufacturers are not opening up their books to showcase you the cost of goods sold, how it's built up, and what is their margin. But you need to know that they are not for non-profit organizations, so they are adding their margin. So here, definitely, you need to understand also the sensitivity of your cost model, if you can afford a contract manufacturer, or it's better to go in-house. Very important, if you are working with venture capitals, they are not really have a strong appetite to invest in steel on the ground. Rather, they are going toward, let's say, business development, product development, but the manufacturing piece definitely is not where they would like to go with their investment. On other side, on the downside of the story is that the minimum order quantity is also what you need to factor in when you are discussing the contractual terms, because each manufacturing organization wants to maximize their running rate, yes? And they would like to produce for 1 week, 24/7, only one product. So the minimum order quantity also needs to be really, really well discussed, because this is a cash flow element where a startup is really sensitive.
Right. Following up on Emil, that's another very significant milestone, moving from your own lab to a contracting manufacturing organization or CMO. Sometimes companies think, okay, we'll run a pilot, right, just to see that our processes do run in larger scale. And if everything goes well, maybe we need to make minor adjustments. Then we'll move with this CMO or a larger CMO. The thing is that once you expose your processes to the CMO, unless your invention is already protected by patent application, that is considered as a disclosure. And if you only signed like an NDA or an MTA, there is still a risk, because again, it's a matter of trust between the partners. So it's never too early to file for patent application for your core technology, because even a pilot run in a CMO can prove problematic in the future in case the CMO steals your patent or invention, or another client of the CMO to which the CMO has told, let's call it, your secrets. Okay, so always file for patent protection for your invention before you take your technology outside your own lab.
Correct. Well said. Well said.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd love to add from Emil that how important owned pilot plants are. So having your own pilot facility is so powerful. And it also helps build your claim sets, right? Because then you can have your end-to-end process flow, and you can test your process tolerances, which improve your claim set for moving to a co-manufacturer, and you're able to understand what breaks. You know, I think we often focus on how to perfect our product or ingredients in our process. Understanding how to break it is almost more important, because when you transfer your technology from lab to pilot to manufacturing, it will break and you'll have to put it back together, and understanding what that looks like and understanding those where the risk tolerances for your process is so critical. And I know at Impossible, we were able to very early on invest in our own pilot manufacturing for proteins, food, extrusion, and so on. And it's been a huge benefit to the teams in order to move fast.
One quick caveat on that is we're also seeing that companies are kind of choosing to build their own pilot facilities at their own peril if they don't have the right team in place, because R&D is a very different thing than manufacturing. And
Right.
so R&D, you're trying to, find new things. It's a discovery process. It's iterative. With manufacturing, you're trying to do the same thing every day consistently. And it's just a completely different skill set. So for some companies, it works out well if they have the right team in place. For others, it can be hard. I'll just take this second to say that we are doing a deep dive on non-dilutive funding. Back to what Emil had said about, VCs don't have as much of an appetite for manufacturing. So over the next few months, we'll be coming out with a non-dilutive funding guide that hopefully can help companies navigate some creative and non-dilutive financing options. So with that said, we have a couple more minutes for the panel, and then we'll move to the Q&A. But Howard, if you could just speak a minute about why distribution is so critical.
Okay, I'd just like to add to the last conversation just
Sure.
one more thing. I fully agree on the pilot facilities, and Margie had a comment before about growing together with your partners, and that's true with your contract manufacturers as well. But once you commit to a manufacturing process, to Lane's point about R&D somewhat simultaneous with manufacturing, once you commit to a process, you're stuck with that process if you've capitalized on that process. So if you have an extruder and you've grown a lot of resources to use that extruder, and now you have a process that doesn't need the extruder, your CFO is not going to be very happy because you have this piece of equipment sitting there that's not being used. So now, what do you want to talk about?
Just really quickly, a little bit about the
Yeah.
criticality of distribution and
Yeah,
some of
no,
the.
absolutely. Distribution again is another partnership that you have to grow. As Alex said before, you need to your distributor. One is a point of entry. Margie mentioned that getting on the store shelves is critical. Oftentimes, stores and restaurants won't take delivery right from the manufacturer. Cisco has 500,000 items in stock. US Foods has 350,000 items in stock, and they can deliver. Instead of having 500 manufacturers come to a store, you have five distributors come to a store, and they accept that as their point of entry. Once you do that, though, then you may right size your distributor. And I'll put a plug in for Audrey. Back in, I think it was November, she had a seminar just like this, just on distribution. I highly recommend, if you're interested in distribution, to go back and watch it, because it handled it really well. But as you grow from delivering cases locally to delivering pallets or truckloads nationally or internationally, it's a different potential distributor that you need to satisfy that, and different partnerships along the way.
Okay, we'll close this out with one last question. And I'm going to ask if it can be the briefest of answers so we can move on to the Q&A. But for the group, what do you think is the biggest mistake that's made by startups in the alt protein sector? And if you don't have anything that comes to mind, you can skip this one, but I'll start with whoever wants to provide an answer.
I'll say confirmation bias is my short answer. We talked about before, but asking your friends and family, what do you think about my product?
Right. I would say, from an IP perspective, is not preparing early enough to the odd case that you will be successful, right? Thinking about IP as something that we will worry about when we are successful. But then it's much too late. You should plan to the time that if and when you become successful, you have exclusivity on your technology, because planning an IP strategy once you are already successful and selling in commercial scales is very, very too late.
Thank
Much
you.
too late.
I would highlight one element because very few, let's say, startups from day one are profitable, and to have a strong roadmap toward profitability, that's very important, because if you cannot prove that in 3 years, 4 years, your business is profitable, then it's really draining all the financial resources. You are losing, let's say, the VC trust, and will be more and more difficult to invest in your growth. So roadmap to profitability definitely is very important.
I love that. I mean, we're all, many of the companies in this space are so focused on the mission and doing something good and shifting food for the benefit of the world. But at the end of the day, the unit economics matter and profitability matters.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, yes, creating a sustainable business is essential for creating sustainable products and keeping them on the market. I think the other piece that is, I think, underappreciated at the beginning is really owning who you are, knowing what you're good at, and knowing how you want to leverage your team strengths for the development process and market launch. and then and that will help you understand who you partner with. Are you looking for someone that will provide sales and distribution? Are you looking for someone that will provide manufacturing? Do you need a technology to enable a specific product? Maybe you're a product development company and you need a specific technology. You work with, a company to provide a solution for you. There's so many ways of partnering within the industry. And I think that it can be very hard at the beginning when there are so many options, and really deciding who you want to be will help provide that clarity and enable you to move faster with much less money.
Thank you. Okay. Well, if no one else wants to weigh in on that one, we can move over to the Q&A portion. Thank you. That was a fun discussion and very, very, very informative. So thank you all so much. And I will pass it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Lane, and thank you for moderating an amazing panel. I could listen to all of you all day. So much great info to share. A reminder for folks in the audience, we will be moving to the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, I know quite a few have been coming in, but please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box so we can get to as many as we can over the next few minutes. We're starting off big with the first question, and Alex, maybe you can handle this one first. And that is, how would you overcome the challenges of implementing a very innovative product where the politics and prices might not be favorable for alt proteins to thrive? The question asker is noting that they think you're from Brazil and that maybe you understand some of the challenges of the culture and the politics towards meat. So putting you on the spot, if you have some observations, and if anyone else wants to hop in, please do so. I think you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. I will leave the politicians on the side for a minute, because that might be a bit too complicated to solve. But, I think, if you think about the resistance to change, let's put it that way, and that can be, lobbyists or, other industry or competitors or price. I always say that entrepreneurs, they have this amazing skill, and they should be very good at, and that skill is storytelling, right? So maybe your price is not there today, but if you can tell a compelling story on how this is going to be at the right price at some point, that's it. So sometimes entrepreneurs, they say, oh, it's very expensive, but it's just now. And then when you ask the question, okay, but when did that, what can you do to make that more viable? And people normally don't have an answer. So I can say from the corporate side, when we engage with the startups, at least on the Givaudan side, we are not necessarily looking for the best price now, but definitely we need to know the pathway, to something which can be profitable. And I think that is the same, in terms of other resistances you have. So how can you overcome? How can you, get like enough reasons to believe that your product is, innovative and is going to kind of close a gap with the consumer? So to me, is get the data and put in your story. That's what you need to do.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to chime in before we move to the next one?
If we are taking, let's say, other industry examples as well, it takes time. This is not just an evolution. This is a revolution. Alternative protein definitely will disrupt the food industry, and there is a lot of resistance. But the good thing is that corporates are embracing this revolution, working closely with startup companies, investing in startup companies, partnering with startup companies. So this is inevitable that will disrupt the traditional food industry. There is resistance, but we will see changes.
Thank you. And Margie, maybe you can take this one, since I know Impossible just launched their brand new brand, which looks amazing. The next question is, how important is branding and brand identity when you're commercializing your product? Do you have any thoughts there?
I think it becomes increasingly more and more important. I think at the initial stages, you can do a lot with free, thinking about how do you show up on TikTok, Instagram, there's a lot of ways to get free marketing and your story out there. As you start growing and you start looking for that mass adoption, building a brand, telling your story, making it crystal clear what that value proposition is important. I would say it needs to be tied to an amazing product that meets that requirement. You can market something and you can get that first buy through marketing, but it's that product that will come back and will allow people to rebuy. And so I think that there's an aspect of getting the story out, telling the story, owning it, and pushing that messaging while also matching that with a product. I think at Impossible, as many of you may have seen, we've launched our new brand at Expo West last week, and we're very excited for it. And it's really about just rejuvenating our brand, telling the story, and making sure that we're out there in the world. I think that the alt meat space, we're young, we're emerging, and we're hoping that more and more companies will start telling the story because it will really help everyone in the sector. If we can draw people into the mission to buy plant-based or to buy from precision fermented or cell ag, then all of these come together and create a solution space. And so the more storytelling we do as an industry, the better we'll be. People will understand what we're about. But I wouldn't say start there. I wouldn't be the very first thing I'd go after. But it's important to build that as you build your company.
Thank you. Well, I was just at Expo West, and I have to say, Impossible's area was jam-packed all day, every day, with people trying the products and resonating with the brands.
Love that.
Shifting gears a bit, we have a series of questions around IP. So someone's asking, are there other forms of IP protections outside of patents? Noting that patents are time consuming, they're expensive in the food industry. So how would you recommend startups learning about or leveraging other forms of IP protection? What else exists out there? Aaron, what would you share with this person?
Right, so I didn't tell this in the introduction, but I'm also a licensed patent attorney. And when you prepare to take the bar, you learn about several types of IP, but not all of them are relevant for technological fields, and we are obviously in a technological field. So copyrights are non-relevant here. So the two most relevant IP types for commercial processes and technological processes and products are obviously patents and trade secrets. And it all goes down to risk management, okay? If you completely trust all the third parties you are working with, okay, then theoretically, there's no need to file any form of patent until the day your commercial products leave the factory. But this is a huge risk because information leaks all the time, and you can't really trust 100% people outside your company, certainly not indefinitely. Employees leave the company, employees of the CMOs leave the company, and whether you like it or not, they take certain ideas and even knowledge with them, okay? So you are in a risk of, let's call it leakage, okay? That can haunt you in the future. So if your invention, if your core technology is or can be patent protected, I strongly suggest investing the $10, $15, maybe $20,000 or euros, depending where you are, in filing a very robust, in-depth patent application to portray in full the most nuanced ideas of your invention, of your technology. So when your product will come to market, you will have exclusivity for the methods for producing this product and for the actual product, okay? Because there's no other way that you can prevent others from copying your product in the jurisdictions, obviously, that you are interested of. So I'm well aware of patents being much pricier than just keeping a trade secret, right? But the risk is much, much lower.
Thank you. And building on this topic, can exclusivity of production IP actually be retained when working with a CDMO? You're enhancing their expertise, they have a knowledge base. How do you think that that works?
Very good question. So when you discuss a marriage with a CMO or with every other strategic partner, whatever, any entity, any commercial entity outside your own firm, right? So there are several defaults involved. The default is that each company retains its background IP, right? That's pretty obvious. But the major issue is how to split the IP that will become or may be produced during the corporation, right? During the joint version, during the co-manufacturing, whatever. So a skilled and experienced patent attorney or an IP lawyer, there are some of them, would know to delineate all the possible scenarios, and by clearly discussing with the other party your incentives and their incentive, your goals and their goals, you can, before starting the actual work, put it in writing. If something comes up, what will be the guidelines to decide who owns what? Because some knowledge will be formed. It's pretty much a guarantee. And you can anticipate what can be achieved during this corporation. And you should put in writing guidelines of how to assign certain types of IP to each one of the parties. So there is clarity, there is a mutual agreement about what's important to which side, right? What relates to the core business of each side. And in the off chance that there will be a divorce at the end, that neither of the sides will be able to prevent the other side from pursuing its core business.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And we're going to move on to now talk about, we have some questions here around B2B strategies. This question asker has the observation that manufacturing seems like the most critical component of a B2B startup. And besides manufacturing, what would you think are the most important areas for B2B companies to get right to succeed? Are there other areas they should be focusing on? Kind of generally, what strategies would you suggest for B2B companies specifically? I'll open it up to anyone who wants to chime in with this one.
I'll just contribute 2 sentences, okay? So a B2B company can think about 2 independent layers of IP protection. The first layer will be any invention relating to how you produce your ingredient that you will sell as a B2B, right? So if you have a good process, you can protect that. If you hand a certain way, which is not the default way of the industry to make something, and it gives you an advantage, you can protect the methods and processes you use to produce the ingredient. But that's the base layer or the first layer. The second thing is the company that will buy from you the ingredient, they will eventually sell it in one way or the other, right? And most often than not, the ingredient will be formulated into an alternative protein product, right? Alternative egg, alternative dairy, alternative meat, whatever. So the second layer of protection is for the recipes and formulation of the ultimate consumer product, right? It will be wrong, if you ask me, to say to yourself, I'm a B2B company, all my technology is just producing the ingredient. It will be much wiser to form two layers of protection, one for the production of the ingredient and one for the utilization of the ingredient as one ingredient within a formulation of a consumer product.
Thank you. Thoughts from any of the other mentors around B2B strategies and what specifically is important for B2B companies to get right outside of manufacturing?
One thing about B2B companies is you're selling to somebody, as Aaron said, that is using your product to do something else. And the more that you can help your B customer to solve their problem of how they're going to satisfy their customer, the easier it is to get them to say yes to your contract. And whether that be, there's a large range. If you're selling to a restaurant, an ingredient to a food manufacturer, they're using it in large quantity, but what are they going to do with it? The more data that you can give them to help solve their problems, to do their job well, then the easier it is for them to get to yes, and the easier it is for you to gain that partnership with them. And then similar to partnerships with suppliers, partnerships with your customer is just as important, because you need to have like mind. You need to I think Margie talked about returns. There's a problem of returns, or there's a problem of just word of mouth. If you're selling to other businesses, they talk to their friends who are all in other businesses like them, and you want each of them to be there. So there's less customers, but each one is more important. And so the more that you can help them to do their job correctly, the better it is for you to sell to more customers.
And maybe building on that and being a B2B company, right, Givaudan. So, one thing is, manufacturing, but if you think about that, you have to reach out to this large number of customers out there. There are a few things that I would recommend you to do, which is, partnering for product development. So if you have companies that can help you with product development, so then you don't need to build that capability by yourself. And another part, so that you see the, how effective is your ingredient in formulation. And I think this is key. At the end, you have an ingredient, but it has to perform in many different levels in the consumer product. And I think that is super critical. So before even thinking about manufacturing a lot of volumes, you need to see where your ingredient best fit. And the other part where I think it's quite important as well, as a young startup, it's going to be hard for you to build like a large sales team, partner with people that can present your ingredient to customers, like the ones that already have access to the customers, and partner with them to showcase your product. I think that's also super critical, is market access and product development.
Here, I have a bit of experience as well on dealing with a B2B relationship, working with a startup, and exactly how Alex was highlighting, the helping or co-working with the customer in the product development, because in many instances, the alternative protein companies are creating something breakthrough, something new, a sweetener, alternative fat, name it, and how these new ingredients can be included in a yogurt, in meat application, in many other, let's say, consumer-related products. Definitely, they have the know-how, but you have your know-how on the ingredient, and the cooperation is really important. And very unique thing is that when you are a B2B company, you will become part of your customer value chain. their success is your success. Their failure with the product, the end product, what you are co-creating, is your failure as well. Therefore, here you need to be really responsive, really proactive in coming out with the best end product, working on product improvement initiatives, cost improvement initiatives, so that you will become part of the customer value chain.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say that I 101% agree with whatever Emil said. Everything Emil said, I 100% agree.
We have some great advice here.
Yeah, walk to walk.
Yeah, to add, I think the leaning into that customization piece for your B2B partnerships, especially when you're young and you have that flexibility and it may end up being your prime business, is super important. The customers or the people you're selling your product or technology to know what they want often, and they know their consumers the best. And so really listening to that and understanding how to really lean into that can really help build both a great partnership, but also create products that will last in the market.
Thank you. And our next area of questioning is around regulatory hurdles. How would you suggest navigating regulatory hurdles as a startup? What are things that folks should be considering out there? And then actually, let's just start with that. I know it's a fairly broad question.
I can give you the most basic answer. Start as early as you can, because regulation varies in time. Obviously, in the United States, it's like 6 months for a self-GRAS, and then maybe 6 months further to a non-question letter. But in Israel, it's about a year. There's Singapore. Europe is the most strict. So start as early as you can.
Yeah, and we have a very strong, attention to regulatory, right? And I would say start as early, collect as many input as you can. I mean, of course, look at the market where you want to launch it, and go like really mad after feedback, after input. We know that sometimes you get pushed from other people, maybe investors, and you want to keep going, like to raise money and kind of postpone things like regulatory. Do it as soon as possible. It will take time. It will take longer than you anticipate. So the earlier you get into it and you start adjusting your process and your product, the better will be. It's time consuming. So what I would also recommend is, again, I mean, we've been talking about this theme of partnership. There are partners out there that can help you with this. You don't have to invest up front in like, agents or consulting and all of that. There are a bunch of companies that would be willing to partner with you because of your technology, and they can provide coaching to you. So look for this. It's very important to listen to them, to their experience, and the kind of the pathways on how to navigate this very complex, theme, which is regulatory.
And how do you see the medium-term landscape changing regarding novel food regulations? Do you think anything will change within that in the medium term?
I don't have a specific point of view there myself. But I say this, right? Because sometimes you're like, oh, it takes too long, it's very bureaucratic. But I also say, it's for our safety, right? So that we should pay attention to this. Yeah, it's painful, right? It takes time and all this. But I think things can be improved for sure, process-wise.
Right.
I don't have any projection on when and how this could change, but I hope it can be simplified, but still be strong enough, to protect, people and consumers.
Is about the safety as well of the consumers and the implication of a novel food, yeah, because this is a new way of doing the traditional thing. So this is an alternative. What is the health impact? What is the acceptance, even from religion perspective or health perspective? But if we are taking, let's say, analogies from other industries, the government needs to take as well social protections, because in many cases the traditional farming will be impacted. Yes, so what will happen with the current infrastructure, with the current practices? It takes time. Yes, so as the full electric cars step by step we replace, let's say, the traditional engines, it takes time. Social implication needs to be addressed here as well, needs to be in parallel ways addressing not just the novel food angle, but the implications of the broader industry.
I think we have time for one last question today, and that is if you could, I'll open it up to anyone who wants to answer this. If you could discuss licensing in different regions, and if you have any general advice for companies approaching licensing, anything to say about how it's usually done or how much time it takes, how much it costs, just general guidelines for licensing.
If I may to start, because if we are talking about licensing a technology, yes, definitely first you need to prove and you need to build a proof of concept with the licensor. And this is a one-to-one type of relationship, how your technology can be localized in a certain infrastructure. And this takes time. Of course, it's the flip side is that yes, you are commercializing technology into a B2B manner, and you are not, let's say, doing the commercialization of the end product. So all these marketing activities, commercialization of the finished good is not your burden. But it takes time. You need to find, let's say, and you need to offer something unique to your customer in order to license your technology.
The underlying consideration for licensing to work is first of all, you have to have a technology and be the owner of this technology in order for you to license it out, right? So how do you gain exclusivity for this technology? Again, you file for patent and get granted patents for the technology. Only after that you can license them out, and that's a new stream of revenue that every company will be happy to make profit of in case the company itself doesn't have the capacity to perform this technology.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap things up today. But really, thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise here today. I know I see some appreciation for all of you in the chat over there. And just a reminder to everyone, all the panelists are GFI mentors. We have 25 other mentors, and they are all here to help you build your businesses. We'll share more info in our follow-up email, but you can request meetings with as many mentors as you would like to really benefit from their expertise and experience. So we do hope you take advantage of that program. And just a reminder, we will not be having our typical Business of All Protein seminar in April, but we will be releasing our State of the Industry reports. I know those are eagerly anticipated every single year, so please stay tuned for the plant-based cultivated and fermentation State of the Industry reports, which we'll be releasing along with webinars in mid-April. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and we will see you all soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.